Welcome to Sibos Today. I'm Nadine DeReza.
And I'm Stephen Chia, and what a fantastic start to Sibos 2016 Geneva. It's just the first day, but any standout moments for you so far?
Certainly, and I've been talking to loads of people. They loved the opening plenary, particularly focusing on technology, cyber resilience. But I've got to say, I'm enjoying going around all the different exhibition stands. The teas and
Looking
coffees.
for the coffee and the little snacks here and there? Yes, if you haven't had a chance to visit the booths, they are definitely worth a visit. And we've had lots of wonderful guests on the show as well. But over the next half hour, we'll be looking back at some of today's highlights. So our day is certainly far from over, so stay with us.
Yes, in our programme this afternoon, we'll hear from another game changer at Sibos, Niels Pflaeging. He's the co-founder of the BetaCode network and a thought leader on organisational design. But first, we're talking securities, and we had two very distinguished guests.
Indeed. Earlier today, we met with Satvinder Singh, the head of Global Security Services at Deutsche Bank, and Fabian Vandenreydt, Global Head of Securities Markets, Innotribe, and the SWIFT Institute at SWIFT. We were talking RegTech, the use of new technology to facilitate the delivery of regulatory requirements. Algorithms and analytics are transforming customer due diligence, anti-fraud measures, and bank processes. For example, the way banks decide whether to make a suspicious activity report. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Fabian, let me start off by asking you, how is RegTech being used today?
Well, actually, we should first agree about the definition of RegTech, because it's a new broad term that encompasses lots of things. But I think it's primarily used today to ease reporting and aggregation of data towards producing information for regulators. But there are many more applications of RegTech, like fraud, money laundering, financial crime compliance in general. But as a new term, like fintech, it's being used just because it's so new.
So it sounds like it's got great potential then.
It does. Now, of course, it's very much related to data. It's opened up new avenues also to look at massive data and trying to make the most out of it. And as a responsible for innovation with Innotribe, it's certainly a topic we look forward to support.
So, Finder, let me get your take on this.
So I think if you look at what the industry is really looking to do right now, there's a huge focus on regulation. And the regulation is not just compliance of regulation, but getting the information required to be able to either look at it from an industry perspective and also look at it from a client perspective. So RegTech is really that umbrella that allows us to look at data in isolation, but also in collaboration with what the regulators want and be able to provide that, not only for ourselves, but also for our clients. And I think that's the real important part, really looking at technology as an enabler for what the clients want and what the regulators want.
Are there any downsides? Are there any disadvantages?
I think if you look at the stages of which we are at from a RegTech perspective, we're really at the initial stages of trying to define what it really means. Like all wonderful things, these have phases. So we're now at the stage where we're all excited by its potential. We now need to spend a lot of time, similar to blockchain, similar to many years ago, Bitcoin. We need to make sure that this is not just a terminology that we get excited by, but there's actually something concrete behind it, because there's a real need from an industry perspective. We're all trying to solve the same problems. We're all trying to create the same reports. Regulators want consistency across the industry. So this is our opportunity to actually do something there.
And Fabian, how much is your organisation actually doing at the moment? How much are you concentrating on this as a priority going forward?
I think it's indeed, the important thing is that it's a shared problem or a shared opportunity. So from the standpoint of SWIFT as a cooperative, we are really looking at how we can do that, so in the form of utilities, so that our member banks can actually together solve the same problem. Hence our KYC platform, hence our sanction screening utilities, and many more to come, depending on where the industry is going.
So KYC, know your customer.
Right.
That's right.
But do you think RegTech will be the new fintech, or are we still too early on to say?
I think people are expecting it to be, and I think the answer to that is a lot of people still don't know what the new fintech is. So the definition of the new fintech is yet to be decided. I think the aspiration of fintech as is going to transform the industry, absolutely. And will RegTech do the similar achievement? Of course we want it to, but I think there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of hard work between actually having something that gives you the headlines around it, that everybody buys into, and actually the real concrete information below that. There's a lot of development that needs to happen to make it happen.
But one of the challenges, and I think we spoke about this last year at Sibos in Singapore, is again, a lot of this requires collaboration and connectivity. It means almost everyone getting on board. And as we know, sharing can be a really difficult and challenging process, you know? So, Fabian, what do you think?
Except if by sharing you solve a problem that we all have that is not especially making the one better than the other, or that doesn't eat into competitive advantages of the one against the other. I think that's the concept behind utilities. And of course, like you said, there are stages, so you will have early adopters of those RegTech technologies. They will drive the way it's being embraced, and then, you know, in time, there will be broader adoption. But I think utilities are therefore a good thing, because they allow to share the cost, but they also allow a collective co-design of what those solutions would look like.
And Satvinder, what's your organisation, Deutsche Bank, doing in this area? Are you an early adopter? Where do you see it?
Sure. So can I just go back to the earlier one, and I'll come to your point as well. I think necessity breeds collaboration. And there's a huge amount of necessity around it from two different angles. One, there's a cost angle. I mean, the whole industry is going through significant cost pressures. So what happens when you go through cost pressures? You look at more efficient ways to do what you're doing. The second part is we're all trying to redefine the value we add in that whole chain. Is this the value we add, or are there more value-add services that the organization needs to provide, which the clients are happy to pay for? And I think RegTech and FinTech ticks both those boxes, and therefore you'll see a lot more collaboration in there. To your question on Deutsche, I mean, we're spending a lot of time looking at where our clients are going, both from a regulatory perspective, from an infrastructure perspective, and their own buying requirements. So from a reg perspective, we're in the implementation stage of a lot of the regulations that were drafted post-2008. And now we're really into that phase. So you could say you're 8 years into it, but this is the real implementation that's happening. From an infrastructure place, this is the time that T2S is happening. 3 waves are done, 2 more are left. By this time next year, we're really going to be talking about full-blown T2S happening and the changes that has led to from a client buying behavior. And the last point is clients actually want us to not offer a kind of a la carte menu, but they want us to be able to go in and say, here's your open platform. Here's what I can plug and play. This is what I want Deutsche to do. This is what I want the industry to do. This is what I want a utility to do. And do you have that flexibility, or is it an all or nothing? And over the last 3 years, we've seen organizations that do the all or nothing have lost.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like the next 12 months then are critical for this program. So it's all coming. So the next Sibos, we're going to expect a really good update from you.
You'll get a lot of updates from me for sure, and positive ones.
How much of all this is driven by customers' demands and wants? You were saying they want certain things, but how much of it is coming from tech just saying, let's try this?
Combination of both. Yeah. So clients are getting a lot more demanding. And they have all the right in the world to do that, right? They expect their service providers to raise the bar every single year. And raising of the bar for them is, are you giving me consistent service? That's the basic foundation. Number 2, are you adding value? And where are the products that you're adding value in? Number 3, a lot of our clients look identical to us. So a lot of them are large financial institutions which have the same regulatory obligations as we do. So from their perspective, it's how can you help me with my regulatory obligations? What data do you have? How can you mine that data? How can you provide that data in a form that I can meet my own regulatory obligations?
But let me jump in here, because that's going to be one challenge. If everyone's sharing the same platform, you're kind of saying, I have the same stuff for sale. It means your competition goes up, because what differentiates you from other banks, from other institutions? What's
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. It's a really good question. And the industry debated this when T2S happened. Because 4 or 5 years ago, there was a huge debate that once you standardize settlements, how will agent banks differentiate themselves? And actually, to our credit, we've been able to differentiate and say, while settlements may be commoditized in a T2S environment, the way we are going to differentiate ourselves is our local connectivity, our balance sheet, our ability to put settlement, collateral, FX, liquidity all together as a bundled solution. So I think the industry's challenge is going to be how to create that when RegTech happens, because we've done that from a T2S perspective.
Now, Fabian, I know you're nodding your way there. So what in areas do you agree with Satvinder?
I think the agility agility will be required to package, to bundle different components coming from your own organization, utilities like us and others, fintech companies, and that's where I think that for a firm, and we talk about that, Innotribe, about how to organize for innovation, you really need to have lots of agility, and especially very good architects, data architects, in the case of RegTech, who understand how to bundle those things. And I guess that's also why it's important to be scouting, to be managing ecosystems of vendors, of fintech, talking to regulators, sandboxing, like the one of the word being used, to make sure you get to that agility.
But that's really difficult as well, with all this flexibility, customization, at the same time, compliance on the other hand. You're having to balance and say, let's make it work for our customers.
I think the point there also is to make sure we don't fall into the PR trap. And the PR trap is a very simple one to fall in, that this will come in immediately, this will solve the world of its problems, and then we'll move on to something else. Like blockchain, like a lot of distributed ledger technology, the timing around this needs a sense of realism. So while agility is hugely important, a sense of realism. Because otherwise what happens is you go out and you raise expectations that this is going to come in 1 or 2 years. This is, in my mind, as much as I'd love for it to transform by the next Sibos, I think by next Sibos we would have taken another 3 steps forward with many more to follow as well. And that's the same with a lot of the technology we're talking about. This will take time. And somebody the other day said, if you look at distributed ledger or blockchain, when will it start making a material impact? Not a small impact, a material impact to the way we look at our securities industry. And the general consensus was 5 years if you're optimistic, 5 to 7 if you're being realistic. And people may debate that, but it's not 1 year.
And is that shared across the industry, that it's not necessarily a cautious approach, but it's not rushing in to see it happen within the next 12 months?
I think the marketing around it has been superb. Because if you go back to Sibos, you go back to the Singapore last year, majority of the conversation was how this sort of technology, and I don't like using the word disruptive because it has a negative connotation, but let's say innovative technology will impact the business. And if you walked out of Sibos last year, you would have thought that by this time this year, everything would have been on distributed ledger, everything would have been absolutely perfect. The sense of realism comes in not with lack of enthusiasm to do it. The sense of realism comes in because there are many, many things between idea generation and making it go live, including regulatory approvals, including getting digital assets classified, including sharing of technology, sharing of information across various jurisdictions, along with all the other changes that are already happening. So that's the sense of realism that kicks in. Not a sense of people are not being less enthusiastic. It's just being realistic about it.
Moderated excitement. Because I think of the example of driverless cars.
Yes.
I mean, we've been talking about it for over a decade, but only now are we starting to see some level of it on the roads, but still, we're some ways to go.
I think we tend to forget this innovation curve thing. You get very enthusiastic and then you say, it's not going to do anything, but it will, but it takes more time. And it's not about technology. There is governance, there is processes, regulation.
But is that impatience? Is that because we've got a young millennial generation coming in saying, why is it taking so long? I mean, everybody wants everything on their phone right away.
Combination, I think there is a sense of impatience by the new generation, but I think there's also a sense of realism that what we're talking about is extremely complex, right? Even T2S, and I go back to T2S quite a lot, and kudos for the team for actually implementing the way they have. But if you look at it, it's 7 or 8 years of planning. Why is that? Because it was multi-market, looking at the settlement system. So while we want to do it very quickly, and I think we should never lose enthusiasm for it, but just to understand the complexity of what we're trying to do, and again, getting it right 99% isn't an option. It's got to be 100% right. Because even that 1% failure will throw the industry completely off.
Fabian, if I could bring you in as well, just finally, are there any other industries using technology to meet their regulatory requirements? And can you share very quickly some best practices if you've seen it?
There are many. One which is sounds left field, but I think the securities industry is about transparency as well. And frozen meat, is taking my Innotribe hat on, has implemented a system for ages that tracks between the cow down to the frozen meat and make it transparent at every stage where that meat is. So that's an example if you look for transparency in the securities industry, and that is blockchain, but that's many other things. That's an example.
Right.
So it's good to see best practice outside the industry. We weren't expecting frozen meat,
You
were
want to
we?
track your meat? I can track. Where's my ribeye coming in from this
I'm going to watch that in the Sainsbury's supermarket now. I need to see it.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much
Thank
for
you
coming along.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I think that would really change the dynamics, because sometimes you go to the supermarket and you're like, I wonder where this came from. And now you can actually find out.
Yep, and I'm
Right?
never going to look at frozen meat in the same way.
That's true, that is true. Well, you can hear more on this issue tomorrow when Fabian Vandenreydt moderates a session when Red Tech meets FinTech the day after tomorrow, how technology disruption intersects with regulation in securities.
Well, next it's time for the second interview in our Sibos Game Changer series. And earlier I spoke with Niels Pflaeging, who's a thought leader on organisational design. You're with Sibos TV. I'm Nadine Dereza, and I'm speaking now with Niels Pflaeging, co-founder of the BetaCode network. Now, Niels is a thought leader on organisational design, an advocate for a new breed of leadership and profound change in organisations. Welcome to you. Thank you very much for coming along. Now, I know you've focused, haven't you, over the years on organisational design in your work. What actually drew you to that area?
Yes, in my previous work life, I was a financial manager, a controller. Corporate controlling was my line of work. So I did lots of budget planning and corporate reporting, plan actuals, analysis, and so on. At the time when I worked in German multinationals in Brazil doing that kind of stuff, financial management and performance management, I found out about a little movement, a think tank that had come up in Great Britain, in the UK, which was called the Beyond Budgeting Roundtable. And they were preaching organizational leadership without plans or budgets and command control at all. So that for me was a radical proposition. I thought that is ludicrous. You cannot run a company without planning and budgets.
And so cutting edge, but I know you've bought into that idea of
Yes.
getting rid of any
Yes.
budgetary ideas or forward planning, and we'll come back to that in a moment. I know you've gone on record as saying that people are not your problem, but processes are. What do you mean by that?
Yes, most organizations tend to think that they have a people problem. The people are it's in an organization. There's one big riddle. Only people can behave. The organization cannot behave. You know, only people can behave. The organization, it doesn't really exist physically. So whenever you look at an organization, you see people behaving in certain ways, and you tend to think, what are they doing? They're wasting their time, doing ludicrous, wasteful things. And at the time of when I got into this movement of rethinking performance management and rethinking management for the 21st century, we came along the idea that people are not the problem, but the systems are the problem. The organizational systems that we build, the organizational structures and models and designs that we put in place, they force or even occasionally bribe people to behave in ludicrous ways.
Now, I know you are at the forefront of trying to get people to organise for complexity, and you argue that organisations need to radically decentralise. Now, you've got a big challenge on your hand as Sibos, because you've got some very well-established financial institutions here.
Oh, yes.
And I thought that complexity meant that we should have stronger control from the centre.
Yes, very counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
If there's so much complexity. By the way, complexity is something, it produces something very simple. There's a very simple word for what it really does. It creates surprise. Whenever there's complexity, there's surprise. The weather is complex, it creates surprises for us, you know. The weather forecast said there will be sunshine, but we walk out and it rains, you know. That's complexity. So complexity in itself, it's neither good nor bad. It's just, not sure what word I can use here on Sibos TV, but we get in trouble if we are not prepared for the complexity. Complexity is neither good nor bad, but we get in trouble if we go out unprepared and encounter surprise and complexity.
And I know your latest book is Organised for Complexity. It's got an incredibly long title, so I'll keep it there.
Yes.
Organised for Complexity.
Yes.
What does that tell us about the world that we're living in, though? Because it is a complex world.
Yes. What complexity does to work and organization is that it makes organizational steering, or what we usually call command and control, impossible. Or let's say command and control and management, as we are used to, as we know it, it becomes a travesty on it by itself. What happens is that complexity already kills management the social technology 40 years ago, in the 1970s.
Now, it's interesting, that term, command and control, and I've been talking about it as well, because those wonderful new technology companies, those fintech companies, haven't got those legacy hierarchies that many other large institutions have. So they've started from scratch, those lovely flat organizations, so they don't have this issue in the main, I would say. So how can you actually transform into a peach organization?
Yes, what I call the peach organization.
Peach organization.
Which is radically decentralized instead of pyramid.
Yes.
Peach, I use the peach as a metaphor for an organization that has a center and a periphery, and the periphery is the juicy part of the peach.
Was it your favorite fruit? Could it have been any fruit?
No, it was just that command and control is represented usually by a pyramid, where you have thinkers and at the top, managers who steer the organization from the top down. Sometimes there is a little bottom-up participation, but that's just for theater.
So like the thinkers and the doers, I suppose, were
That is, in fact, the essence of management of social technology.
Yeah.
The division between thinkers at the top and doers at the bottom, and then you need steering mechanisms to steer down. The brilliant concept of management that inventors of management like Frederick Taylor, Henry Ford, inherited to us.
So you've got the management, the thinkers at the top, and the doers, the workers at the bottom. Can you have thinkers and doers together?
I sometimes like to say that's the wrong question. The question is not can you. The question is we must, so how do we do it? We have to reunite the thinking and the doing. We have to let go of the division between thinkers and doers. And the only way to do that is to get rid of management of social technology. I like to say that the way we run organization with budgets and plans and targets from the top and bonus systems. There are current corporate scandals that have all been caused by this kind of command and control model. Volkswagen has gotten this year or last year through this kind of scandal. Now it goes back to the performance management systems that we put in place and that drive unethical or even criminal or wrong or wasteful behavior.
So tell us about successful peach-looking organizations.
Yes.
Can you...
By the way, startups, you mentioned startups?
Yes.
The new tech startups, they have the advantage at the beginning to be small, and if you're a startup, you cannot have command and control division. It's very chaotic. Everybody has to think and do and put on different heads and roles at all times, and you cannot have command and control in a startup. But once a startup grows beyond 20, 30, maybe 50 people, then the traditional structure creation sets in. Success of an organization these days does not so much depend on the quality of the product, but the quality of the organization.
So let's focus on the organizations that are getting it right and have done so for a long time. And I know there is an example in Sweden, isn't there? Handelsbanken, who really do pride themselves on that. I don't know if they call it peach organization, but certainly not command and control.
They wouldn't call it a peach organization, but what Handelsbanken has always said for 45 years now is that they are highly decentralized, in fact, radically decentralized. So Handelsbanken, I was born 45 years ago, at the time when Handelsbanken was transformed from being very much command and control driven, very traditional, hierarchical, bureaucratic. They transformed in 1971 to what I call the peach model. So they wouldn't probably see themselves as a peach organization, but certainly they describe themselves as radically decentralized, which means the periphery is in charge to make decisions, which in a bank like Handelsbanken are the branches.
So how do they manage to keep that going? Because that's what, 37, 40 years they've been doing that successfully, and their credit ratings are up there with the best of them.
Yes,
they are
have
excellent.
The best credit rating in the industry. They have had the best return on equity in the industry for 45 years now, running every quarter. So they are highly competitive, and they have the best customer relationships of our most satisfied customers as well, and also employees. And there's not much secret to what they do, really. They don't have better people or better products. They are just a bank like anybody else, any other bank. But the real difference is the model that they have maintained. It's not corporate headquarters in Stockholm, that's the bank. It's each and every branch is the bank. And only the branches are supposed to do business. They don't have business units, or they don't talk of different channels or stuff like that. A lot of the buzzwords we use today in the financial industry are in fact very much still in the command and control mindset.
I know you also advocate eliminating many management practices.
Yes.
So the annual planning, the budgeting, the management by objectives. I've got a whole list of them here.
Yes.
Incentives and in performance appraisals. You're going to get rid of a whole industry of people if you get rid of these terms. But how can leaders run their businesses without these tools? What will they have to do?
They have to work the business, not the people. all these things that you mentioned, budgeting, target setting, target negotiation, driving people's behavior through incentives, it's all very much all corporate theater. We like to say that's the front stage of the organization, but on the backstage, value has to be created, and it's often not even possible to do good work if you have incentives driving your behavior all the time. The work of leaders is pretty much to, as they say in Handelsbanken, to sit on your hands.
Yeah.
And to wait for people to look for help if they need it. That's it. Create the boundaries so that people can perform.
Now, I know you've mentioned as well about there's organisations have to have more Y people and fewer X people. Very quickly, what do you mean by these terms?
Yes. One of the pioneers of motivational theory in the 1950s, 1960s in the United States was Douglas McGregor, and he was the first to talk about human nature as something that we imagine about other people. We have assumptions or theories about other people's human nature at work. And he was the first to suggest that there are actually two different models of thinking about other people at work and then the human nature. One of these ideas or concepts he called it Theory X and the other Theory Y. And Theory X basically assumes that people they dislike work, they want to avoid it if they can, so they have to be forced or bribed to make an effort and to take responsibility and to have orientation. And Theory Y, this other image of human nature, it says, well, people have to work to feed themselves and their loved ones, but they also want to take an interest in their work.
So enjoy work, have a passion for it.
Yes, in principle they have. If the conditions are right, they will bring their passion to work, naturally. You don't have to force or bribe them. They are intrinsically motivated. Theory X is very much about extrinsically motivating people from the outside with targets, rules, budgets.
Now, I want you to help financial services companies that are looking for ideas. So if they are still under that traditional command and control...
Which most are.
What can they do to turn peachy into your way of thinking?
Yes, one thing that is worth thinking through is this question of do I really want to imagine people as dependable fools that have to be bribed to make an effort, or do I want to think people of self-motivated, basically self-organized people who are adults and who can be adults at work? But we do not allow it because we have all these control systems and all this behaviorism changing.
But if you're a big multinational organisation, where do you start? What's the first place to start?
Stop changing the people. Again, people are not the problem, so start changing the model. At the time of the Beyond Budgeting Roundtable, when I was a director with that movement, we thought that abolishing budgets could be a first step. In the meantime, I've learned that it's not necessarily a good first step to abolish the budgeting, but it is a good step to... It's a good and necessary step to do. So organizations, banks, and all kinds of organizations in the finance industry, they should get rid of management by objectives, of budgeting, of annual planning, of individual target setting, of bonuses, or bribes, as I like to call them.
Well, any examples of where it's been good in the past or present?
Yes, I think, well, in the finance industry, Handelsbanken is the most beautiful case, I think.
Yep.
In other industries, there are organizations that are very well known, and everybody knows them. They ring lots of bells, like Toyota in the car industry.
Toyota's become incredibly big as a company.
Oh, yes.
So had its own crisis as well. Do you think they would have been worse handled if they'd been under command and control? Or do you think they've handled their crisis well as a result of their organisational structure?
Yes, their crisis in 2008 is a prime example of that a decent organization, a very good organization, a peach or beta organization, as I call it, the real danger for it is to grow too fast. And Toyota has, in fact, I would say, suffered too much growth for a very long time. So in 2008, 2009, I think that turned back on them.
Yeah.
Toyota has shown superior performance for 30, 40, 50 years. And the 2008, 2009 thing that they had wasn't really a quality problem. That was all clarified, that it was, in fact, the drivers who caused these accidents at the time. Nevertheless, their way of reacting to that crisis, the way Toyota responded to the crisis was very typical. They are not good at blaming fast.
Yeah.
At Toyota, they always ask why 5 times. Why did that happen? We have to get to the ground of it.
Well, I know you're speaking tomorrow morning, aren't you, at Innotribe?
At Innotribe, yes.
Could you give us a very quick preview, because we don't want to spoil it for everybody, of what you're going to be speaking about?
Yes, we will start with the assumption that maybe management of social technology is dead. It might be a zombie technology, You know, so why did that happen? What has complexity to do with the death of management as we know it? And then we will go into what kind of structures do really exist in organizations, what happens to them. And we will also discuss this theory X human being assumptions. You know, what are humans really like?
So it sounds like a fascinating session.
Yeah, highly interactive, lots of interaction, and I think lots of fun.
Yeah, you will do. If you've ever been to Innotribe before, you're in for a whole host of fun. So we wish you the very best with that. Niels, thank you very much for your time. It's been a real pleasure to have you here on Sibos TV. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nadine.
Yeah, he was very interesting, actually. I like the idea management and social technology is zombie technology. And you can catch Niels' main talk here at Sibos tomorrow at 9:30 at Innotribe, which I think is going to be a great way to kick off your day. It's called Organise for Complexity.
I just have to say it, I thought it was a peachy interview.
Thank you.
That's it from Nadine and myself for today. We hope you've had a really useful day's conference and enjoyed the exhibition.
And hopefully you've caught up with some old colleagues and met some new friends too, and learned some useful things you can take back to your own organisation.
But we all have a quiz, so I'm going to check out the Sibos quiz show on the Swift stand that's kicking off at 4:30.
Yes, and don't worry, we're going to bring you the results first thing tomorrow morning on Good Morning Sibos at 8:30, and we hope to see you bright and early for that.
Right now, coming up, it's the latest Capital Markets Union session. Stay with Sibos TV for that.